Welcome back to learning more about the elements of fiction. If you've missed mine on character, on setting, on figurative language, go back and check out my playlist on this channel. Today we're going to talk about the other elements of fiction, things like irony and technique, motivation, a point of view, all of the others that come in after the setting, the character, and the plot line. So let's start off with irony, one of our pieces of figurative language. So irony is the use of words to express something other than and especially the opposite of the literal meaning. Now, usually when we look at dramatic or situational irony in a book, it's implying through plot or character that the actual situation is quite different from that is presented. In other words, you as the reader or the viewer understand one thing while the character understands something else. Maybe perhaps you have knowledge that the character does not, and that would be irony. Another technique we use in fiction is foreshadowing. Now, foreshadowing is the presentation of material in a word in such a way that later events are now prepared for. Now, foreshadowing can result from the establishment of a mood or atmosphere. If you start off with our setting being dark and gloomy, there might be foreshadowing that something bad might happen. If you start off with a setting off in the future and you're looking at technology that looks unfamiliar, you might be foreshadowing that we are starting up in science fiction. So a lot of times foreshadowing results from the establishment of mood or atmosphere. Foreshadowing can also result from an event that adumbrates a later action. It can also result from the appearance of physical objects or facts, or from the revelation of a fundamental and decisive character trait. So your characters and the plot line, the plot line that they follow along with, the sequence of events, they can also foreshadow. Whether your character seems to be angry or upset, they might strike out later on at something, maybe enact some sort of revenge. If a plot line event seems to go unfinished, you might foreshadow that there has to be a resolution coming in. And in all cases, the purposes of foreshadowing is to prepare the reader or the viewer for the action to come. So taking a look at a couple more pieces of the elements of literature, we have imagery. Now that is the use of language to create mental images and sensory impressions. Now imagery can be used for emotional effect and to intensify the impact on the reader. When we think of imagery, usually you're thinking of your five senses. What kind of words or what kind of viewer representation is the director or the author using in order to create a picture in your mind? Dialogue is lines spoken between a character in a fiction or play, and so when you look at dialogue, those are the actual spoken words by the character. Now as we move on to another element of fiction, the point of view, we start off with the narrator, and the narrator is the teller of a story. There are two types of narrators: the reliable narrator. The reader accepts the statements of fact and judgment without serious question. You can trust the narrator. You can rely on what the narrator tells you. There is also the type called an unreliable narrator. Now, the reader questions or seeks to qualify the statements of fact and judgment. Perhaps the narrator is not telling you everything, and you realize that. Perhaps the narrator has said one thing and then turned around and said something else, and now the reader questions what the narrator is trying to say. So then what is the point of view? Now that we've established what a narrator is, a point of view is the perspective from which the events in a story are told. Now, the author may choose to use any of the following. They might decide to be omniscient and third-person omniscient, which means you learn about everything. You can jump from character to character and figure out all of their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions. You know what everyone is thinking. You can have omniscient third-person limited, where we know what certain people are thinking. We know what those people are thinking and feeling, but perhaps we might be holding back on one or more characters. So there's a limit as to how many people you can see into. Again, a lot of times we might see this in horror stories where we know what our main good guy characters are thinking and feeling, but there might be a bad guy character that we just don't get to see. You can have an objective point of view where it just seems like they're reporting the facts. You don't get thoughts or emotions put into it. Your narrator's just going to present the events as one would see them. You also have first person or subjective point of view, where the point of view is being told directly from the person in the story who is narrating the events. They are there, they are going through their thoughts and feelings. You get to have their first person point of view as they're going through it at the moment. Lastly, you might also have limited point of view. Sometimes it's a little bit obsolete now, but people call it the second person point of view, where you are basically being told a how-to. Maybe you're getting general instructions. Maybe somebody is sequencing out a plot line of events for you. There are no thoughts and feelings and emotions being expressed at all. And so how do we start looking for which one is which? So the omniscient third person character, we have some signal pronouns that tell us that the person who's telling us the story is not in the story itself. So your signal pronouns of he, she, and they might tell you already you're looking at third person. And it is omniscient when you are not limited by anyone's character's views or behaviors. You know everything about all characters. As we look at that third person limited, you are restricted to your knowledge to certain characters' views or behaviors. Again, it's third person, so your signal pronouns would be he, she, or they. The objective point of view also might use the signal pronouns he, she, or they, and you get absolutely no inner thoughts and feelings. It seems like you're only getting the plot line of events. You're getting from point A to point B about the characters. And then lastly, with your first, and it's usually called second person point of view, but nowadays we call it limited. First person and limited points of view use first person pronouns, I, we, and us. So narrator restricts the perspective in first person point of view to that of only one character. Now you get all their thoughts and feelings and emotions, that's why it's subjective, but you're just getting it from the person that you're following along in the story with. So now when you just get limited point of view, you do get to see, hear, or feel what somebody is going through, but you only get that one point of view. You get to find only that one character. When we move on to sensory details, it's a technique in writing that describes what is seen, heard, smelled, tasted, or touched. Your five senses. Now, writers often use sensory details to enhance the mood and the theme in writing. They're painting a pretty picture so you can see what it is that they see when they create, that you can feel, that you can touch what it is that they have created, so your own reader's mind doesn't have to make it up itself. Now, as we continue on to the techniques of fiction, we've got an allusion, and there are several different kinds. An allusion is a reference within a literary work to another work of literature, art, or perhaps a real event. The reference is often brief, and sometimes it might not be directly stated, they might just imply it. For example, a lot of times we will see a lot of things coming from history or mythology or biblical allusions. So mythological allusion would be a direct or indirect reference to a character or event in certain mythologies around the world. Biblical allusion would be a reference to a character or event from the Bible. And historical allusions would be references to a person or an event in history. Now, of course, there could be other allusions where we're alluding to a work of art, another book, or another piece of literature, but the most common three are mythological, biblical, and historical. As we move back into the elements of literature, let's talk a bit about theme. The theme is the central or universal idea of a piece of fiction. It is perception about life and the human condition. What are the lessons being learned? Now, you could have an implicit theme. That refers to the author's ability to construct the piece in such a way that through inference, the reader understands the theme. Usually your theme is well justified and is well spoken, but there could be implicit themes. Through inferencing, through perhaps the foreshadowing or through flashbacks, the reader's going to understand a secondary theme. The theme can also be main ideas of nonfiction as well. And a lot of times in nonfiction, you're going to get an explicit theme. Usually when we do things such as persuasion and influence, rhetoric, a lot of times there's going to be a very explicit theme. They're going to state a thesis, they're going to state their beliefs at the very beginning, and then they will do it once again at the end. So an explicit theme refers to when the author overtly states the theme somewhere in the work. So a lot of times we look at universal themes, and the most common theme is the human condition. Now, a universal theme transcends social and cultural boundaries and speaks to the common human experience. And the most universal theme is the human condition. It encompasses all of the experiences of being human. So the ongoing way in which humans react to or cope with events in their lives is the human condition. That's the end of our elements of fiction and going through the elements of literature. If you'd like to remember again what characterization is, or if you want to go back and look at setting or plots, please go back into my playlist and look at those. Otherwise, if I've missed something, please add in the comments what more you'd like to learn. And of course, as always, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe to my channel. Thanks for stopping by.